Envy wasn't like the other captains. She had seen her recruitment as an honour, a badge of office to be worn with admiration. The others all barely seemed accepting of their new ranks, and Envy couldn't understand why. When she saw them in action though, it was clear. Every one of them was a master combatant, able to dispatch entire squads single-handed, without it even being a challenge. She immediately knew she wasn't as powerful as any of them. She was a talented soldier for sure, but compared to the captains, she seemed like a mere child standing in their shadow. The description was even more apt, due to her stealth skills and jet black armour. Despite this, more often than not it was Lust who got the stealth-based missions, and Envy instead had to focus on open combat, just supporting the other captains. Even when she was sent out on a stealth operation, it was always just to back up Lust. The missions between her and Lust were still her favourites though, and she began to feel a bond to the femme fatale. This of course led to her and Lust spending a few nights in each other's arms, but once they were back at the base, Lust wouldn't even look her in the eye. No matter how she tried to appeal to the woman, nothing came of it, and she was left all alone. In time, she began spending more time with their leader, giving her status updates on the various squads' progress and asking for additional missions or tasks to carry out. Her leader made good use of her during this time, and for a while Envy felt happy. Even if her fellow captains wouldn't treat her with respect, she at least had the respect of her commander. In fact, the only time any of the captains ever claimed to need her help was when Lust told her of a rebellion, and asked her to join them. For a moment this tore her. If she helped out the captains, then maybe they would treat her as an equal. But as Lust continued to offer empty promises, she remembered all the times she had been ignored by her in the past. She may have told Lust that she would join the rebellion, but that night she informed their leader of everything that was taking place. She kept her up to date for the following weeks, right up until the day that Greed burst through the door and said that they were being attacked. She knew this couldn't be right, and suspected something else was at work. As the others are getting ready, she silently slips away and investigates the location at which Greed claimed there had been fighting. Upon reaching this location, she sees Greed's squad guarding something. Knowing that the time has come, she draws the pistol from her side and opens fires into the soldiers, taking down 3 of them before they are even fully aware of what is taking place. As the incoming laser fire forces her to cover, she radios for her squad to come to her location and provide her with covering fire. With the additional firepower, she is able to gun down a few more of Greed's men before making her escape, leading her men straight to the command centre. Once here, she informs their leader of what was taking place and helps ready a counterattack. She is then ordered to take all the remaining soldiers and guard the exit, ensuring that none of the captains can escape. It was a hard fight to the exit, but guarding it was the greatest challenge. The men under her command fought valiantly, but there seemed to be a never-ending number of soldiers attacking them. Their opponents were also some of the strongest around, each having been trained by the other 6 captains, and at least some portion of their skills had rubbed off on the men under their command. By the time the onslaught appeared to stop, Envy only had a handful of men left, and they were surrounded by the bodies of the fallen. Just as she felt the fighting was over, a pair of figures rounded the corner. Rage and Lust. The sight of the 2 captains caused her to panic and begin blindly firing. Lust dived out of the way as Rage charged headfirst into the fire, letting the bullets bury into his flesh. She emptied her entire magazine into the giant, but it didn't even slow him down. He swatted aside the closest soldier with a swing of his battle axe, before cutting down the rest in a blood-fueled fury, sending limbs flying and turning Envy's armour from black to red. He then came face to face with her. He was nearly twice her height, and she could do little more than stand there unblinking, petrified with fear. He buried his axe into a corpse, before felling Envy with a single punch. As she fell to the ground, he began to slam his fists into her face, and it was only thanks to Lust that he stopped before he broke completely through her skull. Instead, the 2 just stepped over the broken body and left the compound. Envy eventually wakes up later in a hospital, her face covered in bandages, and with no idea if the rebellion has been stopped. Fearing that the captains were still at large, she forces herself out of the hospital bed and sneaks away. Removing the bandages lets her see just how close she had come to death. Her face barely even looks human anymore, and she made sure to always keep it covered from that point on. Despite her disfigured appearance, she is able to reintegrate herself into society for the most part, but she ends up obsessed with finding out what happened to the others. In time, she learns of a soldier who has been tasked with finding them, but after tracking him down, she only saw a man spending time with his family, apparently oblivious to the urgency of his task. She obviously couldn't directly talk to him, but watching his wife and child playing in the garden gave her an idea on how to focus his attention. A wicked smile came over her face as she withdrew a knife and walked towards them. Envy has Strength 2, Perception 1, Endurance 4, Charisma 1, Intelligence 6, Agility 5 and Luck 10. Strength is raised purely for us to have easier access to the perk we want from this tree. Envy is certainly not a strong individual. She isn't particularly perceptive either, and we will be treating this as a dump stat for the build. Endurance is at 4. This will provide us with a few more hit points without making the character too tanky. Charisma is bottomed out at 1. Envy is jealous, bitter, and needy. These aren't traits that tend to be viewed as charming. Intelligence is our second highest stat at 6. Envy is far from an idiot, and having a decent intelligence will help this character out. Agility is sitting at the midway point for this build. We will need to have a decent number of action points readily available, but we don't want to go overboard, so instead I've gone for a bit of a balance. And finally, Luck is the primary stat for the character. Although she may not realise it, Envy has been incredibly lucky. Most people who had suffered through the same trials as she had undergone would have died each and every time, but something about her means that she just keeps on going. The essential perks for this build are Gunslinger, Better Criticals, Critical Banker, 4-Leaf Clover, and Grim Reaper's Sprint. Gunslinger is obviously going to be the base damage perk for the build, but the ability to disarm enemies thanks to this perk is not one to be underrated either. The luck perks work amazingly to complement one another. With all of them working together, we end up with constantly recharging deadly criticals and plenty of action points to ensure we can keep using them. If you've ever played as a high luck build before, then you likely already know how amazing the synergy of these perks are. The recommended perks for Envy are Armourer, Gun Nut, Science, and Action Girl. The modding perks shouldn't really need an explanation. We want our equipment to be the best it can be, but we may get lucky with random drops, so they're not necessarily essential. Action Girl is here to help out with our AP management. Although we have a good chance of refilling our action points bar due to Grim Reaper's Sprint, we don't want to rely on this. Instead, we grab the ranks of Action Girl in order to ensure we can always use VATS. And last of all, the role-playing perks are Ricochet, Chem Resistant, Mysterious Stranger, and Sneak. Ricochet may or may not be a great perk. I honestly don't know, as I haven't been able to get it to trigger at the time of writing this. It can potentially cause an enemy's shots to hit them instead of you, and has a higher chance of happening at lower healths, so in theory it should be a good safety net. I have a tendency to overheal though, so it didn't serve me that well. Chem Resistant is a perk that did get use, as I used a variety of chems while playtesting. Although all chems are great to use to make yourself stronger, Orange Mentats is one of particular use for this build, as it gives us a great increase to our accuracy in VATS, helping us to land more shots. The Mysterious Stranger perk is one that helps out this build a lot. Due to the high amount of time we spend in VATS, there is a good chance we will see him a fair few times. I think he appeared for me more times just while playing this character than on all of my other characters combined. The final perk of the build is Sneak. I found that stealth wasn't actually that critical to the build, but it certainly does play into the character. Envy has constantly sought to be noticed, but she naturally goes unseen. Envy will want to join up with all of the various factions in the game, and prove herself to each of them. Which ones you ultimately side with doesn't matter all that much. Envy's loyalty is based almost entirely on praise and recognition, so go with whoever you think treats you the best. I decided to travel alone whilst playing as this character, but you can travel with a companion if you so wish. As with the faction you pick, you should choose your companion based off of if you feel they respect you enough. You will want to use any VATS effective pistols you find when playing this build. The Deliverer and Righteous Authority are guaranteed legendaries that fit this role exceptionally well, so they're what I used while testing. As a VATS-based build, we want all our weapons to be as VATS efficient as possible, but to also deal out as much damage on criticals as they possibly can. The armour for this build is a full suit of shadowed heavy combat armour, worn atop a marine wetsuit. In addition, you will want to wear operator goggles and a skull bandana. This set as a whole provides a great look, easily one of my favourites in the entire game. It is also important that we keep Envy's face covered while playing. She doesn't want anyone to see what was done to her. In terms of stats, the armour will provide decent resistances, but it's worthwhile keeping an eye out for legendary pieces to further improve the character. In combat, we rely heavily on VATS to get us through every encounter. We can generate stored criticals within 3 or 4 shots, so feel free to use criticals as often as you like. We aren't the strongest of characters though, so try and divide and conquer in combat. The last thing you want is to be overwhelmed by more enemies than you can handle. Use cover and range to your advantage. Keep in mind that criticals are guaranteed hits, so they work well from a longer distance, effectively letting you use your pistols as snipers. Role-playing for this build is similar to Pride. You'll be trying to constantly prove your worth, but unlike Pride, you want to prove yourself to everyone in the Wastes, not just the strongest. To this extent, I recommend completing as many quests as possible, and doing everything you possibly can when playing. I hope that all of you enjoyed the conclusion to both the 7 Sins builds and my weekly Fallout 4 builds. Don't forget to leave behind a like if you've enjoyed the video, and check out my other builds if you're looking for something else to play. I now have 50 different Fallout 4 builds, so there is certainly no shortage. Although I am taking a bit of a break from the builds, I am by no means stopping them outright. Instead, I will be working on a different style of build that will take a lot longer to make, so I can't stick to a weekly schedule anymore. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to see the builds I have coming in the future, and click on one of the on-screen links if you're looking for something right now.